I just started recording.
So I guess I watched all the videos. I just finished watching those this morning. Kind of saw your conversation started, and then the evolution of your conversation to where you are now. And I was just kind of wondering, like, at what point. So I think at the last recordings, you two had separate recordings, and Justyna, you shared some field recordings that you had made, and we're talking about that process. And then Emmanuel, you were talking about how to kind of the logistics of your collaboration, right, and the kind of the difficulty across like space and time. So I'm just wondering, like, where are you at with your project now, and have you started stitching together videos, or are you still kind of doing field recordings?
Well, she sent me the videos, and now I'm currently in the stage. It's not on this computer. It's on my other. I do my editing on my other computer. So I've started like putting the videos together. And our next meeting, we were supposed to, look at the videos and see what she liked and I like, and what we need to add and stuff like that, and kind of go back and forth from there. Using the found, her videos and finding my found videos and kind of putting them together. And then also with the sound. This week was like the first week we were supposed to like really combine the things together.
Yeah, I'm working on some more sound transformations because I am preparing like sonification of photos, graffitis on church wall.
So. Yeah, I think that process is really interesting. I had never kind of thought about translating an image into sounds, and it's kind of like synesthesia, right? When you have like one sense that it's like a neurological condition where basically one sensory input kind of triggers another unrelated sensory input. And so that's what it reminded me of this kind of intentional synesthesia in your work. And I was wondering, Emmanuel, if you're kind of exploring that avenue as well, and if so, how?
You talking about like the sound aspect? Because through my art project, I just found found objects. I kind of wanted to use like found sound, like sound you can like easily access like over the internet. Mm-hmm. Also too, I did have the idea. I started it, but I didn't finish. Like making sculptures that I can hit and kind of make sounds out of that.
It made me think too of.
It doesn't sound as cool as she's doing photo sound, like taking sound out of photos. It doesn't sound as cool as hers, but
no, I think it does sound cool. I think the idea of sampling it has like a really rich kind of historical background in both visual arts and like music and sound art too. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that makes me think too of the video, Emmanuel, that you shared in one of these recordings where that guy was getting chased by the police for making sound, essentially, right? So that guy he was just making sounds, and then that triggered this kind of punishment, which you all have also been talking about and exploring, this like crime and punishment and kind of punishing noise in a way, which I think that was very bizarre to me, and also made me think down like different avenues too about noise as punishment in other situations, right? Like the US military overseas using sound as a punishment to torture prisoners and things like that. So I think they all kind of, it was interesting to kind of watch your conversations and to see how it evolved and to see these different threads that kind of, you pick up and they kind of diverge, but then they all kind of still relate to each other. So I thought that was a really interesting part of the process.
Yeah, it's. I think noise can be punishment, but it's also kind of like resistance. So it's also my way of taking part in those protests, because I couldn't be there like with my body because of the pandemic. I was a little bit afraid because of the COVID situation. So for me, it's kind of like also the way to participate in the protest.
I thought it was interesting the way that your conversation had evolved. You started thinking about surveillance, and then you went on to kind of witchcraft and the different iterations of kind of witch hunts, right? With a history in Poland. We obviously have a history of witch trials in the United States too, but I think you were more comparing that to almost like the police as these modern day witch hunters, and kind of who ends up getting kind of persecuted and having violence inflicted upon them. And I just thought that was also a really interesting way to evolve your conversation, thinking about also how surveillance relates to punishment and things like the panopticon, or right, like the way that we are being surveilled and how surveillance directly often leads to punishment, whether or not whatever is criminal. So yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about those concepts and kind of the relationship to each other, and maybe where you're at in terms of thinking about those.
Yeah, I mean, well, the idea we had for the video, because we had so much, so the conversation was so rich and packed with content, and we agreed that we wanted the video to be around 10 minutes, like around 10 minutes. We had the idea of like, jumping back and forth. So maybe like 1 minute will be about this topic, the next minute will be about another topic, and then jumping back and forth, not kind of sticking to one topic. I mean, the overall idea of the project would be like talking about like her images talk about sexism, government control, obviously like the witchcraft, and then we have the similar things in the United States. So using those topics and combining them together and just showing like no matter like because we have a different race and different culture, but there's still similarities and problems that we face, either via our government, the internet, etc. So we kind of wanted to bring those two realities together, like an abstract way. Like you see an abstract painting, and there's different samples of different things. So we kind of wanted to do that in the video.
Yeah, we were also discussing like a surreal aesthetic to keep it like like a dream, mutual dreaming about problems, but also solutions. But but I think it will be I think surreal is interesting, like a key to this piece we are thinking about. Yeah, because we're always very important what happens in between. That's why I suggested that maybe we will make like a double screen projection.
Emmanuel, what kind of videos are you kind of collecting from the internet, or what exactly are you looking at or thinking about in terms of those contributions to the project?
Well, I've been looking at videos of like lynching, like looking at like that being compared to like a witch hunt. Mm-hmm. So kind of combining that footage with the footage that she has shot with like trees, and then using like placing that over like sound, and then getting other images of like guns, like random sounds, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think that's tying in like lynchings to the witch hunts, right? And this are really powerful, really kind of awful histories of really targeted oppression and violence. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it's interesting to think about too, that, when we're looking at places that have been sites of these horrific events, right? And thinking about like the memory of that place. And does that, like, I think Justyna, you talked about that, like the energy of a place that has this history of oppression, and how does that affect that energy, and thinking about like, does it affect the trees, the soil, right? The way that like trees communicate to each other through their roots, and like if that tree also, like thinking about, can the tree suffer that trauma, or like the witnessing of that, or things about like, does the soil change because of what it's been exposed to, the chemical makeup of the soil, and do trees grow differently or communicate differently? Or I think that's a really
I'm not sure if the trees have the trauma, but I have chosen very like symbolic places, because it happens that I have been visiting my friend. She's living near places which are strongly connected to the tradition, like pagan traditions and traditions related to witchcraft in Poland. So I wanted to keep my videos more symbolic, images of places, of certain places in Poland, which maybe have some kind of energy. I am not very much into this kind of like esoteric stuff. I don't think I believe in energies changing like trees or stuff like that. And maybe it's good direction if Emmanuel wants to use more like direct, form.
I don't really have access to like go to like actual. I mean, she kind of has an advantage over me because she has access to go to these places where these things happened. I really don't have access to go to like where these places happen. I think that'd be interesting too. The conversation of like access to places, because you know, when she first told me like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the mountain where the witches were. I was like, what?
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah, but I think by witches we just mean like pagan.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, a lot of countries also have that history too, right? Where Christianity in some form or other came in and like wiped out.
All countries.
Right, like forced conversion and punishment for other pre-existing spiritual practices or social practices related to those spiritual practices, right, is unfortunately extremely common.
Yeah, and for me, it's a great metaphor of what's happening in my country right now, basically, because maybe you know that we have huge protests, women's strike. Right. Because I wanted to say something about this topic, but I didn't want to be like, you know, straightforward and make a collage out of the anti-church graffitis on the walls. So I decided that I want to make it more symbolic and sonify those.
I think also too, with my part, like instead of like going to the actual place and finding found videos of the internet, it does. I mean, we talked about this too about like how people perceive people over the internet, and like and you know, by finding found videos, it's like, you know, I have preconceived notions about Poland. She has preconceived notions about America based off of just the internet alone. So I think that kind of thinking translating for me only using, oh, I've used some videos that I recorded myself, but mostly using videos that are found talks about, you know, people's access to information, the control of the media over people's thinking, etc. So that's why I think it's important to use like found video, because it points to like that notion of like, you know, how do we perceive other people, uh, and do we perceive them to be this way because the media told us to, you know? Right. And so I was very much interested in that. That's what I would think about, like using found video. You know, I mean, I don't know if you heard her music before.
I heard a little. I tried to click around her websites a little bit before the meeting, so I heard a bit.
But like her music is very like different than mine. So then there would be like a clash of cultures, you know, like I'm really much interested into like, you know, hip hop instrumentation and trap instrumentation. And she's into like, you know, the industrial sound, underground scene, like in her country. And so combining those two together would be like, you know, really, really cool.
Yeah,
plus imagery.
Well, it sounds like the way that you're approaching it too is almost like it's within those practices, right? Like you're into hip hop, and hip hop has a rich history of sampling and resampling, right? And so and then you're approaching your end of this project, your contribution, by kind of taking samples from the internet and of videos and sounds, and then for Justyna, kind of taking these original field recordings, but the way that you're translating those sounds or those images becomes these kinds of industrial sounds, rather than like you wouldn't necessarily place the sound immediately into a forest, right? So I think that it seems like you're almost both approaching it from the way that you make your work anyway, but it is really interesting to see how those combine and relate to each other.
Making sonification of pictures is also a way of sampling reality. So
right.
more dots, we can also connect dots here, because it's also sampling, like, you know, even field recording is a way of sampling reality.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's an interesting pairing, because when I was trying to explore both of your practices a bit and check out your websites and things like that, you know, I wouldn't have necessarily made the connection of you two working together or seen the commonality in your work if I had just kind of come across each of your practices individually. But then over the conversations, it turns out that you do have a lot of common interests, and they're just really, of course, expressed through your position and your country and what you're going through. But I think that it was interesting to hear about this crossover between experiences with the protests, you know, for women's reproductive rights in Poland and the Black Lives Matter protests in New York and all over, you know, the US. And I think it was interesting to see those parallels kind of in both of your interest in kind of making work about systemic oppression and violence, and kind of trying to overcome that, or trying to just talk about it, right? Just bring some light to it.
I mean, we try to find like experiences which are common for us to, on the very basic level. And it's, for me, it's really interesting that we have this like experience of protest in 2020. I mean, we have maybe different opinions about the protests and different experience, but it's really something interesting that it happened in 2020, and we both have this, like, you know, experience, and I really want to explore this thing.
The pandemic, right, has exacerbated so many like fucked up social conditions in so many different countries, and then on top of that, people are out of work, and so they're right then all of a sudden, if you're doing like the 9-to-5 grind every day and you're exhausted, or you're working multiple jobs, like you don't have that time and that energy to kind of go protest and to get out and make those waves. And so I think it just kind of is this compounding of social unrest in relationship to a global pandemic that I think, yeah, it's happening all over the place. And I hope that things happen because of these protests, right? Because it's kind of, I feel like we're kind of in this period of time right now where there's a lot of potential, and I think it's exciting to see these uprisings against oppressive governments around the world, but it's also kind of scary to think that people are trying to rush back to normal and rush out these vaccines and just kind of sweep all this under the rug and move on. And I think that's my fear, is that people are just going to try to move on and not continue to draw this out and to kind of make change.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if protests will change anything.
Right.
I'm not sure.
That's what I said on the video recorder.
I'm not sure if it's possible.
Justyna, I know that you don't have much time, so I guess do either of you have questions for me, or about specific questions about your project or the direction, or any kind of specific feedback that you're looking for?
So will we be able to meet with you again?
Yeah, I think if you want to meet again next Monday, I have my full-time job has been like very hellish, and so Mondays I'm off, and it's kind of one of the only days where I don't have a bunch of stuff that I have to do. So if Mondays work, I could do earlier too. So Justyna, I know this time is kind of late for you, so I could meet next Monday and do it earlier in the day if you want to follow up, and if Emmanuel, if you'll have some footage by then too, so that we can.
Yeah, I was saying like next Monday we'll definitely have some footage, and
yeah,
me and Justyna will have like another meeting to put it together.
All right, well, it's nice to meet both of you, and I look forward to meeting with you again and seeing where you're at with the project. It sounds exciting, and it's very abstract right now, but I think it's a really cool direction and synthesis, so I'm excited to see where it goes.
Okay, it's recording now. Let me go to share screen.
And what's happening in the left corner?
Yeah, so this is the first part, talking about like the juxtaposition between like religion, and so that's the writing on the wall in the church. So this is like the first idea I was talking to you about juxtaposition of religion and bouncing around to like the different ideas. So yeah, let me play the whole video and then I can explain.
Okay.
And then so this would be like an empty part where we will add something else, like maybe another effect, another video over this video. So this would be like the base. Like I try to make like the appearance of like scary looking woods. So I can skip a little more. And then this part right here, I put like the Black Lives Matter protest next to this. And then these women talking about like their rights being taken away. And so I had that on repeat. And in this part, with the religious dancing in the sound video. So it like gave the illusion like the sound is pounding under.
I'm not sure about using the faces of protesters.
You don't want to use the faces, so take that out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's for me it's a little bit too much like straightforward. If you
Oh,
know,
okay.
I think I would like to keep it maybe more symbolic, and I'm not sure if it's necessary to use visuals and sounds.
Okay. But did you like the side by side? Like this is what you were talking about, like side by side, like kind
Yeah,
of idea.
but I liked the first part when it was like this.
Oh, this part.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and we can do something with this. I'm not sure about this digital distortion as well, because it kind of reminds me of like very random visuals used, for example, in, I don't know, clubs or during concerts. So I think it would be cool to keep it maybe a little bit raw and without this digital
like this right here, like this raw, like this.
Yeah, for example, I'm not sure if adding too much effects is adding more sense to art. I don't know if you know what I mean.
No, I understand.
I think there's an opportunity though, if you're doing a dual screen video, right, to have to like, if Emmanuel's kind of visual style is a little bit different than yours, to let him explore some of that on you know what I mean, on the right screen while you keep yours minimal. And I think that also there's some really nice moments. I'm imagining if you're using that video, just, you know, that you took in the forest, and if it was like juxtaposed like this part right here, I really like this, that layering of the dancing on top of the sand. I think that's a really nice poetic moment. And I think that there might be, you know, it might not always need to make sense necessarily next to each other, but if there's something that you're both exploring the same idea, and maybe in each moment it doesn't quite add up, but after you watch the whole thing, you start to make connections between what's on both screens. I can see that nicely going with, like, you have that that water, the kind of trickling water kind of moment with the greenish lights on that. It could be a nice juxtaposition.
Maybe I shouldn't use the protester's face on mine either. Then you're kind of challenging me, Justyna, and I use faces. Kind of hard for me.
Sorry. It's maybe because of my activist background.
Okay.
It's always very necessary to be careful about showing people's faces from the protest.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations about that here too during the Black Lives Matter protests, about people posting stuff on Instagram and things like that, and the ability to track people. But you could also, I mean, that might be a moment to explore the kind of digital effects, right? That you're distorting.
Maybe if we had this and we distorted it so you couldn't see who it was.
Right. Yeah, maybe. I think that you could. Or what if it just becomes like the screen on the right, where it just becomes kind of this weird like undulating mass, right? And you can't necessarily see the people and make out each protester, but that kind of thing. And then again, thinking back to like moments of filming a river or whatever, right? Like how do these things, like, and the dust clouds that ripple out, kind of also like water ripples out, these kind of visual threads that might connect throughout.
I finally found a way where you can see what I'm editing. You just can't hear. I'm trying to figure out, maybe tomorrow or after we get off the phone, I can go get a microphone, then you can hear the sound. Because I wanted to show you the sound production I did, but I don't think you can hear it without the feedback.
Maybe you have to set up the audio interface in this software.
Maybe I could do it. Let's see. Okay, so my audio. I'm trying to see if I can play the sound. Okay, let me play this and see if it. Okay, let's try this.
Yeah. Here we go.
No.
It's like the basics, it's like a basic sound. I didn't do like anything complex because I wanted you to add your stuff to it.
Don't worry, I will rework.
Where are those sounds coming from?
Oh, this is sound. I produced this sound. This is like a dark choir, kind of like for that medieval feel, because we're talking about like witches. Okay. And then I add like slight drums, and this is a flute and a choir. It's simple.
I can hear some triple hi-hats.
Yeah. But yeah, so I focused on like that dark choir sample, like it's like a plug-in, like you could put on the keyboard, and then I just like made like my own melody with the dark choir and the flute, because studying, like, I watch like a lot of medieval like stuff that happens in like Europe, and they always like play the flute and there's always a choir singing. So I was like, well, let me put that with like the kind of trap modern instrumental kind of flavor. And since we talk about like witches and your country, it's kind of like my little homage.
Yeah, try to make a tiny soundtrack to this 10 minutes long. Maybe I will try to make it more spatial with some binaural plugins, so you can feel more space on your headphones.
Tomorrow, since now like she can physically see what I'm doing on the video, I'm gonna try to work on the sound, just figure out like so she can hear it as well, because some of the videos have sound as well. Like this part, like when there's like the people dancing in the corner, there's sound to that video. And so I don't know if she was interested in like, a kind of stop thing, like the audio stops when there's sound and then it goes back, or we just play it all the way through. So it's like a little more abstract. I think I'm gonna take the sound out of this though. I'm gonna take the sound because this one has its own like sound, which probably you can hear on my computer. Let me see. You hear it? So it transfers, and then
And what is that footage after the kind of dancing with the dust?
Oh, this is like some like it's like kind of like distorted video of like protesters in the 1960s. You can kind of see something is going on, but it's like kind of mysterious.
Right.
And at the end, you can kind of like see bodies being dragged away. So I thought that was very interesting.
Justina, how do you feel about that footage, given what you said about the other protest?
I think it might be interesting to use this video with church, maybe here.
Okay.
I mean, I do like having the juxtaposition of the dancing and the protesting, because I think of just like having these kinds of the ways that you express resistance and joy, right? And how these things go hand in hand, and just having the way that bodies can kind of come together. And some of those movements look the same, even though they have really different context. I think it's an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, the video Justina talking about the church, I had it in here, but I don't know where it went. And it kind of had like a similar, like kind of dark edited, but I like the way she filmed it. Or probably let me pull it up, because you can kind of see the church through the trees, and it looks really sinister. It looks really nice, like.
Right. Oh, sorry. I just think there's also like a correspondence too between like religion and protest, right? And in that, I mean, there's different correspondences, but in the protests for reproductive rights, right, a lot of those restrictions come because of teachings of the church that say that, that like you shouldn't have an abortion, and that the fetus is alive or whatever. But then also thinking about the civil rights protests in the 60s, a lot of that actually was organized by church leaders and had a strong connection to religion from the opposite way, where the religious leaders were uplifting that protest for basic human rights in the 1960s. So I think it's kind of interesting the way that the church plays a role in both of those, and in very different ways.
This is actually very interesting because, for example, in Poland in the 80s, Catholic Church was also very much involved into anti-Soviet opposition. So, yeah, the role of the church is not always dark.
Right. It's like slippery. It fluctuates, I think.
Yeah, it's very interesting topic, because there are some theories that that's the reason, because that's the reason why the church is so strong in Poland right now, because it has had so much influence on the collapse of communism and the Pope involved and stuff like that, and it's kind of interesting that it transformed into this oppressive institution.
Right. And then the role that dancing plays in that too, right? Because there's like religious practices do incorporate dancing as part of that religious expression or religious fervor, but then also religion sometimes will come down against dancing and ban, you know, certain kinds of movement and condemn anything that's like sexualized or erotic. But it's like it plays these really complicated roles between oppression and liberation constantly. Is there anything that you want any specific feedback on or kind of questions you have after seeing some of the footage?
I don't know. I think we have the. I really like this concept, and I really think it's meaningful and can be powerful. Now we only have to work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in terms of something that might help a viewer to kind of decipher this, I would definitely, you know, talk about where the source footage is from, talk about, I think just in the process of turning the photographs into sound is a really interesting component. And I think just kind of the conversations that I've seen you have or watched unfold, right, about the role of religion and the church, right, and the role of protest, and just thinking about unpacking some of those, you know, some of that context and history into some kind of short text. But I think for definitely something, videos like this, I think I always really appreciate having ideas into source footage when you're using found footage particularly, and that kind of combination. And I think something else that I find really interesting about the two of you working together, like when I was looking around the Unmute website, I really wouldn't, I obviously I know that the residency paired you, but I would not have made the connection between your practices, right? Because I think that Justyna, you seem really focused on like music and sound and this like industrial kind of like landscape, and Emmanuel, you do like a very interdisciplinary visual practice. So maybe even just like I'm very curious about the process of you two kind of coming together and melding these practices into one. And I think that's interesting to give a bit of context to as well.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, I look forward to seeing the final video, whatever format that is. And yeah, if you want to send a text, if you want some feedback on text, feel free to email me and keep in touch via email. All right, well, good luck. And yeah, I look forward to seeing the video.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.